You have got to respond to what God has done. We are late. God has already elected us, predestined us, saved us. And we are responding. Thank you so much for saying what you did. We respond to grace because we have been graced. Because we've been graced, we're constrained by grace, and therefore in 2 Corinthians 5:14, it is by the love of God that we are constrained. The love of God constrains us. It's a knee-jerk reaction. We can't help but love him. We love him because he first loved us. It's because of the indicative of grace, because of who he is in our lives, that we move to the imperative. We obey. We obey as a response to what God has already done. Is there anyone still left in the house of my archenemy, Saul, that I can show God's covenant loyal love to? Because God is not a contractual God. God is a covenant God. It's an amazing thing. What it really means is when God makes a covenant, he bases it upon himself. That's really what he says in Genesis chapter 22, verse 15. I swear by myself. He said it, I'm going to say the second time, what I've already said in Genesis 12, 1 and 2. I'm swearing by myself because there's no one else I can swear by. Nobody else has integrity. Nobody else is incapable of lying. I'm swearing by myself. And because God makes that covenant, we can trust him. And even when we are not faithful, God is faithful. What does Paul say in Romans chapter 3, right around verse 31? Because of our lack of faithfulness, does it nullify his faithfulness? Absolutely not. And when we're at our worst, he's always at his best. And there's nothing I can do to make him love me more. There's nothing that I can do to make him love me less. No matter how good or bad I may be, he loves me. Is there anyone still left in the house of Saul that I can show God's kindness to? For Jonathan's sake. Because of the covenant that I made with Jonathan, who is now dead, I've got to locate a survivor of Jonathan that I can show kindness to for his sake. And sure enough, the word gets around that he's looking for someone who knows whether or not one of the Jonathan's sons still lives. There's one by the name of Ziba. He is the former chamberlain of King Saul. He's called into the Oval Office. And David asked the same question, verse number 3. Is there anyone still left in the house of Saul that I can show God's kindness to? And Ziba said, yes, there is one. He is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, in Lo-Debar. And then there is this rather demoralizing statement, and he's crippled in both feet. He's an exile. You notice, his emphasis is not so much on geography as it is on anatomy. He's crippled in both feet. The implication seems to speak of, what would you want of him? He's crippled in both feet. He is inert. He is immobilized. Plus, he's living in Lo-Debar, which means wasteland, desolation, barren land. Not only is he living in a desolate place, he is physiologically desolate. And you know what David said? Go get him. Sends his royal entourage down in the ghetto of Lo-Debar on the wrong side of the tracks to pick up this exile. Because David knew what it meant to be one who was overlooked. Samuel went looking for a king. God says there's a king in Jesse's house. Samuel conducted interviews. Nobody submitted a resume. The first 7 looked pretty good. They were all fighters out in the battlefield. And God said, no, not the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, or seventh. Because man, 1 Samuel 16 and 7, looks on the outward appearance, but I look on the heart. Samuel asked Jesse, do you have another son? And Jesse's implication is something like this. Yeah, he's my youngest son, and he's young and ruddy. And the implication is you really don't want him. He's not king material. But God said, he's in your family. I've got to interview him. And God said, this is the one. David knew what it would be like to be overlooked. And it's a terrible thing to come up in a family when your own family members don't believe in you. Your own church folk don't look up to you in terms of confidence. Your own brothers and sisters, and Jesus felt that because his own brothers and sisters didn't believe in him until after the resurrection. And therefore, brothers and sisters, when nobody wants to stand with you, as long as God has called you, as long as God has anointed you and God has appointed you, if God is for you, he's more than the world against you. Sin for it. Can you imagine how Mephibosheth feels when he sees this royal entourage pull up in his little area? He's scared. They finally found me. I've been in exile. I've been living as an anonymous person. I'm the son of a prince. But they've finally located me, and I'm going to be executed. They bring him to Jerusalem. And the first thing that David does is to show him some respect. Doesn't call him crippled boy. Says, Mephibosheth. It's a very short introduction. And his response is, your servant. And he bows down because he respects who the king is, and the king understands that he is a son of a prince. People have a penchant, a propensity, a tendency to catalog you by your deficiency rather than by the dignity that God has put in you. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about all of us are made in the image of God, the imago Dei. You'd be surprised how many individuals have written off individuals who have been handicapped. And they're not supposed to make much impact because they're crippled in both feet. A fellow by the name of Jim Abbott, who used to pitch for the Detroit Tigers, left-handed, only had one hand. Hand was cut off there, but went to the major leagues. Would take the ball out of the glove, his right hand on his nub, wind up and throw it, and then put the glove back on his left hand in case the ball was hit. If it's hit back to him, he'd catch it, flip it back off, throw it down, throw the person out, or retrieve the ball and make a play. One-handed, and yet made the major leagues. Ludwig Beethoven. The legs of the piano were cut off so that he could put his ear to the floor to listen to the vibration of the piano. And he wrote concertos for the hearing ear, even though he couldn't hear. Fanny Crosby wrote at least 600 hymns. My favorite one is Blessed Assurance. But she was blind. Blessed Assurance. Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. Heir salvation, purchase of God, born of his spirit, washed in his blood. Blessed, perfect submission, all is at rest. I and my Savior am happy and blessed. Watching, she can't see. And waiting, looking above, she can't see. Filled with his goodness, lost in his love. Perfect submission, perfect delight. Visions of rapture. She can't see. Now burst on my sight. She can't see. Angels descending, bring from above. Echoes of mercy, whispers of love. She saw more with the third eye of her heart, the eye of faith, than we can see with our optical instruments called pupil, cornea, and eyes. God can use people who have deficiencies, handicaps, etc. Wilma Rudolph won more gold medals than any woman up to that time, black or white, and she had polio. And some of you are sitting here right now. You've been written off. You were voted in high school the most likely not to succeed. Some of you are sitting here right now. You shouldn't have made it through seminary. checks came, all kinds